My name is Maya Rodriguez, I'm 22, and exactly 3 hours after my parents kicked me out on my birthday for being an ungrateful disappointment, I froze every single one of their credit cards, bank accounts, and digital payment systems. They had no idea that for the past 4 years, I'd been the one managing all their online banking, investments, and financial accounts. What happened over the next 72 hours completely destroyed their comfortable lifestyle and forced them to beg the daughter they'd just disowned for mercy. What do you think my parents' reaction was when they realized they couldn't access their own money? Drop your wildest predictions in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe because this revenge story gets absolutely insane. You won't believe how powerless they became without their disappointing daughter. Growing up in the Rodriguez household meant living under a microscope of expectations that were impossible to meet. My parents, Carmen and Roberto Rodriguez, were first-generation immigrants who had built a successful accounting firm through decades of sacrifice and relentless work. Their success story was admirable, but it came with the crushing expectation that their only daughter would follow an equally traditional and respectable path. From the moment I could walk, my life was planned out for me. I would study business, join the family accounting firm, marry someone they approved of, and produce grandchildren who would continue their legacy. Any deviation from this script was met with disappointment, lectures about family honor, and threats about what would happen if I continued to embarrass them. The control started early and grew more suffocating each year. They monitored my grades obsessively, vetted my friends based on their family's social standing, and made it clear that my value as a daughter was directly tied to how well I performed their vision of success. When I showed interest in computer science instead of business, they dismissed it as a phase that I'd outgrow once I matured. But the real issues began when I started college and chose computer science as my major despite their objections. The disappointment in their voices when they told people about my studies was crushing. Maya's still figuring herself out, they'd say to family friends, as if my passion for technology was some kind of temporary mental illness. The cultural expectations made everything worse. In their minds, a successful daughter meant marriage by 25, children by 27, and a life dedicated to family and tradition. My focus on academics and career development was seen as selfishness, and my lack of interest in dating the sons of their friends was treated as a personal insult to their judgment. The financial control was particularly insidious. They paid for my college tuition, but only on the condition that I study what they wanted me to study. When I refused to change my major, they threatened to cut off funding entirely. The power dynamic was clear. Obey their vision for my life, or lose their financial support and face the consequences. What they didn't realize was that their constant threats had motivated me to become completely self-sufficient. I worked multiple part-time jobs, earned scholarships, and built a freelance web development business that covered my living expenses. By my junior year, I was financially independent, but I let them continue paying tuition because I was already planning something bigger. The irony of their financial control was that they were both completely incompetent with technology. My father still printed emails to read them, and my mother asked me to fix the computer every time she accidentally moved a desktop icon. As their digital native daughter, I naturally became their unofficial IT support, handling everything from setting up their smartphones to managing their increasingly complex online financial accounts. What started as helping them navigate online banking gradually evolved into me managing their entire digital financial life. I set up their investment accounts, configured their automatic bill payments, organized their retirement planning, and became the administrator for virtually every digital system they used. They trusted me completely because I was their daughter, and they needed me desperately because they couldn't understand the technology themselves. The deeper irony was that while they were criticizing my career choices and threatening my financial security, they were becoming completely dependent on my technical skills for their own financial management. Every mortgage payment, every investment transaction, every credit card authorization went through systems that I had set up and maintained for them. But the emotional abuse was relentless. Every family gathering became an opportunity for them to express disappointment in my choices. They'd compare me unfavorably to cousins who were married or working in respectable careers, always with the implication that I was wasting my potential and embarrassing the family name. The conditional love was the most painful part. Their affection and approval were directly tied to my compliance with their expectations. When I did things they approved of, I was their brilliant daughter who made them proud. When I asserted independence or pursued my own interests, I became the ungrateful child who didn't appreciate their sacrifices. By my senior year, the tension had reached a breaking point. They'd spent 4 years expecting me to come to my senses and abandon computer science for business. When it became clear that I was going to graduate with honors in my chosen field and had already accepted a software engineering position at a major tech company, their disappointment turned to anger. The fights became more frequent and more cruel. They'd question my judgment, my gratitude, and my respect for family values. The phrase "after everything we've done for you" became a weapon they used whenever I disagreed with their plans for my life. They made it clear that my continued presence in their home was contingent on my willingness to live according to their vision. What they didn't understand was that their constant threats and conditional love had taught me to plan for the worst-case scenario. I'd been preparing for the possibility that they might cut me off or kick me out for years. I had my own savings, my own income, and my own plans for the future. But I also had something else they didn't know about: complete administrative access to every aspect of their financial life. For years of managing their digital accounts had given me passwords, security question answers, and administrative privileges that they'd never thought to revoke because they trusted their daughter implicitly. The stage was set for the most devastating family confrontation in our history. They thought they held all the power because they owned the house and had traditionally controlled the money. They had no idea that their disappointing daughter had been quietly accumulating the ability to turn their comfortable lifestyle upside down with a few clicks on her laptop. The countdown to my 22nd birthday had begun, and neither of us knew that it would become the day everything changed forever. They were planning to deliver an ultimatum about my life choices. I was unknowingly prepared to show them exactly how much power their ungrateful daughter actually possessed. While my parents were busy disapproving of my life choices, I was quietly building 2 empires: my legitimate career in tech, and my complete control over their digital financial infrastructure. What started as simple tech support had evolved into something far more comprehensive and powerful than either of us had realized. It began innocently enough during my freshman year. My parents' accounting firm was struggling to adapt to digital bookkeeping systems, and their home financial management was stuck in the 1990s. They were still writing physical checks, calling banks for account balances, and keeping important documents in filing cabinets instead of secure digital storage. "Maya, you're good with computers," my father said one evening, frustrated with his attempts to set up online banking. "Can you help us get this internet banking thing working?" It was the first time my computer science skills had been acknowledged as useful rather than dismissed as a waste of time. I spent that weekend completely overhauling their financial systems. I set up online banking for all their accounts, configured automatic bill payments, organized digital statements, and created secure password management systems. They were amazed by the efficiency and convenience, finally seeing some value in my technical expertise. But as their needs became more complex, my involvement deepened exponentially. They needed help setting up investment accounts, configuring retirement planning tools, managing business banking for their firm, and navigating an increasingly digital financial landscape. Every time they encountered a new system or platform, they turned to me for help. The key moment came during my sophomore year when they decided to refinance their mortgage and consolidate several business loans. The process required managing multiple online applications, digital document submissions, and complex authentication systems. They were completely overwhelmed, so they asked me to handle the entire process on their behalf. To facilitate this, they gave me full power of attorney for financial transactions, along with all their passwords, security questions, and administrative access. It was supposed to be temporary, just for the refinancing process, but they never revoked the access because they realized how much easier their lives became when I managed everything digitally. By my junior year, I was essentially the chief technology officer of their financial life. I managed their personal banking, business accounts, investment portfolios, insurance policies, credit cards, and even their mortgage payments. They'd gone from being skeptical of my computer skills to being completely dependent on them for their financial functioning. The scope of my access was staggering. I had administrative privileges on accounts containing over $800,000 in liquid assets, investment portfolios worth $1.2 million, business accounts for their accounting firm, and credit lines totaling nearly $300,000. I could see every transaction, authorize payments, freeze accounts, and modify access permissions across their entire financial ecosystem. But the real power came from my understanding of how these systems worked. My parents saw me as their tech support person who helped them access their money. They didn't understand that I wasn't just helping them use their accounts, I had become the gatekeeper controlling whether those accounts functioned at all. The security architecture I'd built was designed around my access, not theirs. Their smartphones used authentication apps that I'd configured. Their passwords were stored in systems I managed. Their backup recovery methods went through email accounts I'd set up for them. Without realizing it, they'd made themselves completely dependent on my technical mediation to access their own wealth. During my senior year, I began documenting the full extent of this access, partly for my own understanding and partly because I was starting to realize the implications of what had happened. I created detailed spreadsheets listing every account, every password, every security protocol, and every administrative privilege I possessed. The documentation revealed something startling. I had the technical ability to completely lock them out of their own financial life with just a few hours of systematic account changes. I could freeze credit cards, lock bank accounts, disable investment access, and block their business banking systems. They would be unable to pay bills, access cash, or conduct business until they could prove their identity and regain control through lengthy verification processes with each individual institution. More importantly, I realized that their dependence on me had created a single point of failure in their entire lifestyle. They'd become so accustomed to me handling everything digital that they'd lost the ability to manage their own accounts independently. They didn't know their own passwords, couldn't navigate the websites, and had no backup systems that didn't involve me. The psychological implications were fascinating. They'd spent years making me feel powerless through financial threats and emotional manipulation, while simultaneously handing me complete technical control over their financial security. They thought they held all the cards because they owned the assets, but I held the keys to accessing those assets in the modern digital economy. I started testing small experiments to understand the extent of their dependence. I'd temporarily change passwords and watch them struggle to access accounts until they asked for my help. I'd modify notification settings and observe how quickly they realized something was wrong. Every test confirmed the same reality: without my technical mediation, they were essentially locked out of their own wealth. The freelance web development business I'd built during college had taught me about cybersecurity, digital authentication, and systems administration. I understood concepts like multi-factor authentication, recovery protocols, and administrative hierarchies that were completely foreign to my parents. This knowledge gap had become a power imbalance that neither of us had fully recognized. By the time my 22nd birthday approached, I had unconsciously accumulated what amounted to financial administrative control over my parents' entire lifestyle. They could threaten to kick me out, cut me off, or disown me, but they couldn't actually function in the modern economy without my technical support. The irony was perfect: they'd spent years threatening my financial security while becoming completely dependent on my technical skills for their own financial access. They saw themselves as the powerful parents controlling their ungrateful daughter's future, while actually being vulnerable to their daughter controlling their present. I hadn't planned this power dynamic. It had evolved organically as they delegated more and more digital tasks to me while simultaneously taking my compliance for granted. But as tensions in our relationship reached a breaking point, I was beginning to realize that the balance of power wasn't what any of us had assumed. The countdown to confrontation was accelerating, and I was unknowingly sitting on the most devastating form of leverage possible: the ability to make their comfortable lifestyle disappear instantly. They thought they were preparing to teach their disappointing daughter a lesson about consequences. They had no idea that their daughter was positioned to teach them a lesson about dependence that would change everything forever. The confrontation that changed everything happened on March 15, my 22nd birthday, during what should have been a celebration but instead became the most devastating argument in our family's history. The tension had been building for weeks, and I could sense that my parents were planning something significant, but I had no idea they were about to deliver an ultimatum that would trigger the most spectacular revenge in family history. The day started ominously. Instead of birthday wishes, I woke up to a formal request to join my parents in the living room for a serious family discussion. The tone was cold, businesslike, and completely devoid of any birthday celebration atmosphere. My mother couldn't even look at me directly, while my father sat with the rigid posture of someone about to deliver an unpleasant verdict. "Maya," my father began, using the voice he reserved for disappointing clients, "your mother and I have been discussing your future, and we've reached some difficult conclusions." The phrase difficult conclusions sent chills down my spine. This wasn't going to be another lecture about my career choices or dating life. This felt final, like a door closing permanently. My mother finally spoke, her voice strained with emotion but firm with resolve. "We've spent 4 years hoping you'd mature and start making responsible decisions about your life. We've supported your education, provided you with every opportunity, and tried to guide you toward a respectable future. But you've consistently chosen to ignore our guidance," my father continued, "and frankly, we're tired of watching you waste your potential on this computer obsession while rejecting everything we've tried to teach you about family responsibility." The computer obsession comment was particularly galling. They were talking about my degree in computer science from a prestigious university, my pending graduation with honors, and my accepted job offer at a major tech company as if it were a hobby I'd picked up to spite them. "We've made a decision," my mother announced. "If you want to continue living like this, rejecting our values and pursuing this inappropriate career path, you can do it on your own. We will no longer enable your irresponsible choices by providing you with a place to live." The words hit like a physical blow. They were kicking me out. On my birthday. For pursuing a successful career that they didn't approve of. My father pulled out an envelope and placed it on the coffee table between us. "We're giving you 30 days to find alternative living arrangements. We'll continue paying for your final semester tuition because we made a commitment, but after graduation, you'll be completely responsible for yourself." "This isn't about punishment," my mother added, though her tears suggested otherwise. "This is about natural consequences. If you want to be independent and make your own choices, then you need to be truly independent." I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what was happening. My parents, who had raised me, supported me, and claimed to love me unconditionally, were literally abandoning me for pursuing a career they didn't approve of. The conditional nature of their love had finally been revealed in all its brutal clarity. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" my father asked, clearly expecting some form of apology or capitulation. That's when something inside me snapped. Not anger, something colder and more calculating. As I sat there looking at my parents, who were so confident in their power to control my life through financial pressure, I realized they had no idea how completely the tables were about to turn. "Actually, I do have something to say," I replied, my voice unnaturally calm. "I think this is probably the best birthday gift you could have given me." They looked confused by my response. They'd expected tears, begging, or promises to change my career path. They hadn't expected acceptance, much less gratitude. "You see," I continued, standing up and walking toward the window, "you've just freed me from any obligation to maintain the systems that make your comfortable lifestyle possible." "What are you talking about?" my mother asked, clearly not understanding the implications of what I was saying. "I'm talking about the fact that for the past 4 years, I've been managing every aspect of your digital financial life. Your banking, your investments, your business accounts, your credit cards, your mortgage payments, everything that allows you to function in the modern economy goes through systems that I set up and maintain." My father's expression began to change as he started to grasp what I was implying. Maya, those are our accounts. You've just been helping us access them. No, Dad. I haven't been helping you access them. I've been controlling access to them. There's a significant difference. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app for their primary checking account. See this? This account, along with all your other accounts, is configured so that any major changes require my authentication. You don't even know the passwords because I set up everything to go through systems I control. The color was draining from both their faces as they began to understand the implications. You're kicking me out because you think you have all the power in this relationship, I explained. You think that because you own the house and traditionally controlled the money, you can force me to comply with your vision for my life. I started walking toward the stairs to go pack my belongings. But what you haven't realized is that ownership means nothing in the digital age if you can't access what you own. And after 30 days of giving me ultimatums, I think it's time you learned what real independence looks like. Maya, wait, my mother called, panic creeping into her voice. You can't, you wouldn't. Wouldn't what, Mom? Wouldn't treat you the same way you're treating me? Wouldn't use financial pressure to force behavioral changes? Wouldn't withdraw support when someone doesn't meet my expectations? I paused at the bottom of the stairs and turned back to face them. You're absolutely right. I would never do something that cruel to people I love. But you're not people I love anymore. You're people who just kicked me out on my birthday for being successful in ways you don't approve of. Happy birthday to me, I said, heading upstairs to pack. This is going to be the most educational experience any of us have ever had. Behind me, I could hear my parents beginning to argue with each other, their voices filled with a growing panic as they started to realize that their powerless daughter might not be as helpless as they'd assumed. The birthday ultimatum had been delivered, but not by them. I was about to teach my parents a lesson about power, dependence, and consequences that would make their threats look like child's play. They thought they were kicking out their disappointing daughter. They had no idea they were about to lose access to their entire lifestyle. I spent exactly 6 hours packing my belongings and planning the most systematic financial revenge in family history. As I folded clothes and packed books, I wasn't thinking about where I was going to live or how I was going to survive. I was thinking about how completely my parents' comfortable existence was about to unravel, and how satisfying it would be to watch them realize their dependence on the daughter they'd just abandoned. The first phase of my plan required careful timing and documentation. I wanted everything I did to be perfectly legal and justifiable, which meant I needed to establish clear evidence that I was the legitimate administrator of their accounts and that I was withdrawing my technical services, not stealing or sabotaging anything. I started by creating detailed screenshots of every account interface, showing my administrative privileges and the dates when these permissions had been granted. I documented every password I'd created, every security protocol I'd established, and every automated system I'd configured for them. This wasn't about covering my tracks, it was about proving that everything I was about to do was within my legitimate authority as their appointed financial technology manager. The beauty of my position was that I wasn't planning to steal money or transfer funds illegally. I was simply going to withdraw my services as their IT support and remove my administrative access from their accounts. The fact that this would effectively lock them out of their own financial life was an unfortunate consequence of their complete dependence on my technical expertise. My laptop became command central for Operation Financial Independence. I opened browser windows for each of their major accounts. 3 checking accounts, 2 savings accounts, 4 credit cards, their mortgage company, 2 investment firms, their business banking system, and various insurance and utility payment platforms. The first step was changing all the contact information from their email addresses to a temporary email account I created specifically for this purpose. This meant that any password reset attempts or security notifications would come to me instead of them. It was a simple administrative change that I was authorized to make, but it would prevent them from regaining access through standard recovery methods. Next, I began systematically changing passwords across all platforms. I replaced their simple, predictable passwords with complex strings that would be impossible to guess. Again, this was within my authority as their account administrator, but it effectively locked them out of systems they'd become completely dependent on. The most devastating step was reconfiguring their multi-factor authentication settings. Instead of sending verification codes to their phones, I redirected everything to authentication apps that only I controlled. This created an impenetrable barrier. Even if they somehow guessed a password, they couldn't complete the login process without access to verification codes that only I could provide. I worked methodically through each account, documenting every change and taking screenshots to prove that I was acting within my legitimate authority. The process took nearly 4 hours, but by the time I was finished, my parents were effectively locked out of their entire digital financial ecosystem. But I didn't stop there. I also modified their automatic bill payment systems, not to cancel them, but to require manual approval for each transaction. This meant that their mortgage, utilities, credit card payments, and business expenses would all require active intervention to process. Without access to the accounts, they wouldn't be able to approve these payments, and their comfortable automated lifestyle would begin to crumble immediately. The psychological warfare element was crucial. I configured email notifications so that they would receive alerts about every failed login attempt, every blocked transaction, and every suspended automatic payment. They would be constantly reminded that their financial life was falling apart, but they would have no way to fix the problems without my intervention. Around 10 p.m., as I was finishing the final account modifications, I heard my parents trying to pay for dinner delivery using their credit card. The payment was declined. Then they tried a different card. Also declined. I could hear the frustration in their voices as they attempted to understand why multiple cards were suddenly not working. Through their bedroom door, I could hear my father on the phone with customer service, trying to resolve what he assumed was a temporary technical glitch. "I don't understand," he was saying. "These cards worked fine this morning. How can they all be frozen simultaneously?" The customer service representative was apparently explaining that the cards had been administratively frozen by an authorized user, and that reactivating them would require verification through the primary account holder's registered authentication methods. Methods that now led directly to me. I heard my mother trying to log into their online banking to check account balances and understand what was happening. After several failed login attempts, she called my father over to help. They spent nearly an hour trying different password combinations, growing increasingly panicked as they realized they couldn't access any of their accounts. "Maya," my father finally called out. "Can you help us with the computer? Something's wrong with all our accounts." The irony was perfect. 3 hours after kicking me out for being an ungrateful disappointment, they were asking for help with the very technical systems they dismissed as my computer obsession. I walked to their doorway with my suitcases in hand, ready to leave for the hotel I'd booked using my own credit card. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I thought you wanted me to be independent and stop relying on family support." "That goes both ways, doesn't it?" "This isn't funny, Maya," my mother said, panic evident in her voice. "We can't access our bank accounts, our credit cards aren't working, and we have bills due tomorrow. You need to fix this right now." "Actually, I don't need to fix anything," I replied calmly. "You kicked me out, remember? You said you were tired of enabling my irresponsible choices. Well, I'm tired of enabling your technological incompetence." My father's voice took on a threatening tone. "Maya, if you've done something to our accounts, that's illegal. You could go to jail for financial sabotage." "I haven't done anything illegal, Dad. I've simply withdrawn my volunteer IT services and revoked my own administrative access to accounts that I set up and maintained for you. Everything I did was within my authority as your appointed technology manager." The panic in their faces was intensifying as they began to understand the scope of the problem. This wasn't a simple password issue that could be resolved with a quick phone call. This was a complete lockout from their entire financial infrastructure. "How long is this going to last?" my mother asked, her voice breaking. "That depends entirely on you," I said, heading toward the front door. When you're ready to apologize for kicking me out on my birthday and treat me with the respect I deserve, we can discuss restoring your access to your accounts. Until then, enjoy your independence." As I walked out of the house with my belongings, I could hear them frantically calling banks and credit card companies, trying to explain their situation to customer service representatives who couldn't help them without proper authentication. The revenge had begun, and it was already more devastating than I'd imagined. My parents, who had felt so powerful when they delivered their birthday ultimatum, were now completely helpless without their disappointing daughter's technical support. Over the next 72 hours, I was about to watch their comfortable lifestyle completely unravel, and there was nothing they could do to stop it without admitting they'd made a terrible mistake. What do you think happened when they realized they couldn't even buy groceries without my help? The next 3 days were absolutely wild, and their desperation reached levels I never could have predicted. Make sure you stay tuned to see how far they were willing to go to get their financial life back. The first 24 hours after I left were both satisfying and surreal. I checked into a nice hotel downtown using my own credit card while my parents spent the night discovering exactly how dependent they'd become on my technical management of their lives. My phone buzzed constantly with calls that I didn't answer and increasingly desperate text messages that I watched with detached fascination. The timeline of their financial collapse was predictable but devastating. By midnight on my birthday, they'd realized that their credit cards weren't just temporarily frozen, they were completely inaccessible. The automatic grocery delivery they'd scheduled for the next morning was declined, along with their usual morning coffee order and my father's daily newspaper subscription. My mother's first text came at 6:47 a.m. "Maya, please call us back. We can't access any of our accounts and we need to pay bills today." By 8:15 a.m., the messages were more urgent. "This isn't funny anymore. We have a mortgage payment due and payroll for the business. You need to fix this immediately." But the real panic set in around 10 a.m. when they tried to access their business banking account to pay their employees. My parents ran an accounting firm with 12 staff members, and payroll was due that day. Without access to their business accounts, they couldn't pay their own employees, a situation that would destroy their professional reputation and potentially violate employment law. I was sitting in a coffee shop near campus, working on my senior project, when my phone rang for the 15th time. This time it was my father's business partner, Miguel, who was apparently at the office trying to understand why the payroll couldn't be processed. "Maya, I don't know what's going on with your parents, but we have a serious problem," Miguel's voicemail said. "The business accounts are frozen, your father can't access anything, and we have employees who need to be paid. Can you please call me back immediately?" The psychological pressure was building exactly as I'd planned. This wasn't just about my parents' personal convenience anymore, their professional reputation and business relationships were on the line. Every hour that passed without resolution made their situation more desperate and more public. Around noon, I received a call from my cousin Elena, who worked as a receptionist at their accounting firm. "Maya, your parents are freaking out. They can't access any of the computer systems, and they're asking me to call you because they say you're the only one who can fix it." The second phase of collapse began in the afternoon. Their automatic bill payment system started sending notification emails about failed transactions. Their mortgage payment was declined. Their car insurance payment bounced. Their utility bills couldn't be processed. Each failed payment triggered late fees and potential service interruptions. But the most devastating moment came when they tried to buy groceries. My mother had gone to their usual supermarket with her debit card, assuming that at least their checking account would work normally. When the payment was declined at the checkout counter, she had to abandon a cart full of groceries in front of other customers, a humiliation that she described in a frantic voicemail as the most embarrassing moment of my life. "Maya, people were staring at me like I was some kind of deadbeat who couldn't afford groceries," she sobbed into the phone. The cashier had to call a manager, and everyone in line was watching. I had to walk out empty-handed. "Please, just tell us what we need to do to fix this." By evening, their situation had become critical. They'd spent the entire day on the phone with various banks and financial institutions, trying to explain their predicament to customer service representatives who couldn't help them without proper authentication. Every conversation followed the same pattern. They'd explain their situation, provide their personal information, but then failed a security verification because all the recovery methods led back to accounts and phone numbers that I controlled. The business crisis was escalating rapidly. Miguel had called 3 more times, each message more urgent than the last. Their employees were threatening to quit if payroll wasn't processed by the end of the week, and several clients were asking questions about the firm's financial stability. My father's final voicemail of the day was a masterpiece of desperation disguised as authority. "Maya, this has gone far enough. You've made your point, but you're destroying our business and our lives. If you don't restore our access immediately, we'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement. This is financial sabotage, and there will be consequences." The threat about law enforcement was particularly amusing because I knew they'd already spoken to the police. My mother had mentioned in an earlier message that they'd visited the local police station to report computer crimes, but the officers had explained that revoking my own administrative access to accounts I'd legitimately managed wasn't illegal. I wasn't stealing money or conducting unauthorized transactions. I was simply no longer providing free IT services to people who'd kicked me out of their home. Day 2 brought even more dramatic developments. I woke up to 17 missed calls and a string of text messages that chronicled their growing desperation. Their mortgage company had called about the missed payment. Their business insurance was being canceled for non-payment. 2 employees had given notice rather than wait for uncertain payroll processing. But the most satisfying moment came when they realized the scope of their digital dependence extended beyond just financial accounts. I'd also been managing their smart home systems, their streaming services, their cloud storage accounts, and even their Wi-Fi network configuration. Without my administrative access, they couldn't even connect their devices to their own internet. The messages became increasingly creative as they tried different approaches to convince me to restore their access. First came guilt: "You're destroying everything we've worked for." Then came bargaining: "We'll give you more freedom if you just fix this." Finally came desperation: "We'll do whatever you want, just please help us." But the most revealing message came from my mother on the evening of day 2. "Maya, I'm sitting in my own house, unable to access my own money, pay my own bills, or even watch TV because nothing works without you. I never realized how much we depended on you for everything. Please come home so we can talk." The admission was exactly what I'd been waiting for. For the first time in my life, my parents were acknowledging their dependence on me instead of demanding my dependence on them. The power dynamic had completely reversed, and they were finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless and vulnerable. But I wasn't ready to end their lesson yet. They'd spent years making me feel small and powerless through financial threats and emotional manipulation. Now it was their turn to experience helplessness while the daughter they'd abandoned held all the cards. The systematic collapse was proceeding perfectly, and the best part was yet to come. Day 3 of their financial lockout brought the most dramatic developments yet. I woke up to a series of texts that revealed just how completely their lives had fallen apart without my technical management. The messages painted a picture of 2 previously confident adults who had been reduced to complete helplessness by their own technological incompetence. "Maya, the electricity company called and said our power will be shut off tomorrow if we can't pay the bill," my mother's 6 a.m. text read. "We tried to pay by phone but they need the account password that you set up. Please help us." The desperation in her messages was escalating rapidly. By 8 a.m., she'd sent 6 more texts describing their deteriorating situation, the car payment bounced and their threatening repossession. "Miguel is talking about dissolving the business partnership, and your father hasn't slept in 2 days." But the real breakthrough came with a phone call from my father at 9:23 a.m. For the first time in years, his voice contained no authority, no disappointment, and no condescension. He sounded broken. "Maya, please answer. I know you're angry with us, and you have every right to be. We made a terrible mistake, and we need to talk." Can you please come home so we can discuss this like adults? The word adults was particularly significant. For the first time, he was acknowledging me as an equal rather than a child whose choices needed to be controlled and corrected. I decided it was time for a strategic appearance. I drove to their house around noon, parking my car in the driveway next to their vehicles that they could no longer afford to fuel because their credit cards were frozen. The symbolism was perfect. I was arriving under my own power while they were literally stuck. When I walked through the front door, the scene was more devastating than I'd imagined. My parents looked like they'd aged 5 years and 3 days. My father was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by printed bank statements and phone numbers, looking defeated and exhausted. My mother was on hold with what sounded like their 4th customer service call of the day. "Maya," my mother said, hanging up the phone and rushing toward me with tears in her eyes. "Thank God you're here. Everything is falling apart, and we can't fix any of it without your help." The role reversal was complete. 3 days ago, they'd been the powerful parents delivering ultimatums to their disappointing daughter. Now they were desperate supplicants begging their daughter for mercy. "I've been getting your messages," I said calmly, taking a seat at the kitchen table. "It sounds like you're experiencing some challenges with independence." My father looked up from his papers with eyes that showed complete defeat. "Maya, we were wrong. About everything. We didn't understand how much we relied on you, and we definitely didn't understand how successful you've become in your field. Our business is collapsing," my mother added. 3 employees have quit, Miguel wants to end our partnership, and we have clients threatening to sue us for failing to process their accounts. We can't run an accounting firm if we can't access our own accounts." The irony was beautiful. My parents, who made their living managing other people's finances, had been completely helpless to manage their own finances without their daughter's technical expertise. "The worst part," my father continued, "is realizing how much we took you for granted. We thought helping us with computers was just simple tech support, but you've been running our entire digital life for years. We never appreciated the complexity of what you were doing for us." I pulled out my laptop and opened it on the kitchen table. "Actually, let me show you exactly what I've been managing for you." I pulled up the documentation I'd created, showing them the full scope of their digital financial ecosystem. 23 different accounts across 14 institutions, 47 automatic payment systems, 31 password-protected platforms, and dozens of interconnected security protocols. "This," I said, gesturing to the screen, "is what you've been calling my computer hobby. This is a complex information technology infrastructure that most small businesses would pay a full-time IT specialist $50,000 a year to maintain." My mother stared at the screen in amazement. "I had no idea it was this complicated. I thought you were just helping us log into websites." "You've been getting professional IT services for free for 4 years, I explained, while simultaneously criticizing my career choice and threatening to withdraw financial support if I didn't abandon the field that gave me these skills. My father leaned back in his chair, the full magnitude of their mistake finally becoming clear. "We're completely dependent on you, aren't we? Without your help, we can't function in the modern economy." "That's exactly right," I confirmed. "You own the assets, but I control access to them. In the digital age, access is everything." The silence that followed was filled with the weight of their realization. They'd spent years believing they held all the power in our relationship because they owned the house and traditionally controlled the money. They'd never considered that their daughter had become the gatekeeper to their entire financial life. "What do you want us to do?" my mother asked quietly. "I want you to understand what you did to me," I replied. "You kicked me out on my birthday for being successful in ways that didn't match your expectations. You tried to use financial pressure to control my life choices, without realizing that you were completely dependent on my technical skills for your own financial functioning." My father nodded slowly. "We understand that now. The question is, how do we make this right? First, you apologize. Not just for kicking me out, but for years of dismissing my intelligence, criticizing my career choices, and treating my success like a disappointment. "We're sorry," my mother said immediately. "We're so sorry, Maya. We were wrong about everything." Second, you acknowledge that my career in computer science isn't a phase or a hobby, it's a legitimate profession that you respect and support. Absolutely, my father agreed. Your skills are incredible, and we've been blind to your achievements. And third, I said, you never threatened to withdraw support or kick me out again. Our relationship is based on mutual respect, not financial control. They both nodded emphatically, desperate to agree to any terms that would restore their access to their own lives. I opened the first banking website and began the process of restoring their access. I'm going to help you regain control of your accounts, but I'm also going to teach you how to manage them independently. You can't be this dependent on anyone, including me. As I typed new passwords and reconfigured their authentication systems, my parents watched with a mixture of gratitude and newfound respect. The daughter they'd tried to control had become their savior, and they were finally understanding the true balance of power in our relationship. The revenge was complete, but more importantly, the family dynamic had been permanently altered. They would never again take my contributions for granted or assume they could manipulate me through financial threats. 6 months after the great financial freeze, my relationship with my parents had transformed completely. The 3-day lockout had been devastating for them, but it became the foundation for the healthiest family dynamic we'd ever had. For the first time in my life, they saw me as an equal rather than a child whose choices needed to be managed and controlled. The immediate aftermath was intensive relationship repair. My parents didn't just apologize, they made concrete changes to demonstrate their newfound respect for my autonomy and achievements. They enrolled in basic computer literacy classes at the local community college, finally taking responsibility for their own digital competence instead of relying entirely on me. More importantly, they made genuine efforts to understand my career path. My father started reading technology magazines and actually asked intelligent questions about my work in software engineering. My mother began bragging to her friends about her daughter's computer science degree instead of making excuses for it. The business crisis had forced them to confront their technological limitations professionally as well. They hired a legitimate IT consultant for their accounting firm and invested in proper digital infrastructure. Miguel, who had nearly dissolved their partnership during the lockout, became an advocate for technology integration in their business practices. The most satisfying change was in how they talked about my achievements. Instead of dismissing my job offer from a major tech company as playing with computers, they began introducing me to people as our daughter, the software engineer, with genuine pride in their voices. But the revenge had taught all of us deeper lessons about power, dependence, and respect in family relationships. My parents learned that financial control is meaningless without technological competence in the modern world. I learned that having power over someone and using it destructively can be just as toxic as being powerless. The 3-day financial freeze had been perfectly legal and completely justified, but it had also been cruel in ways that I sometimes regretted. Watching my parents struggle to buy groceries and face potential business collapse had satisfied my desire for revenge, but it had also shown me how devastating financial vulnerability could be. We established new boundaries that protected everyone's dignity and autonomy. I continued helping them with technology, but as a paid consultant rather than an assumed family obligation. They paid me a reasonable hourly rate for IT services, which formalized our professional relationship and prevented them from taking my expertise for granted. More importantly, we created systems that prevented anyone from having total control over anyone else's essential needs. I taught them basic password management and account recovery procedures, while maintaining emergency access only for legitimate crises. The family dynamic extended beyond just my parents. Extended family members who had witnessed their financial collapse during those 3 days began treating me with newfound respect. Uncle Miguel, who had nearly lost his business partnership, became one of my strongest advocates in family discussions about career choices and life decisions. The transformation was most evident during family gatherings. Instead of defending my career choices or enduring lectures about traditional success, I found myself being consulted as the family technology expert. Relatives who had previously dismissed my computer science degree were now asking for advice about their own digital challenges. My parents' accounting firm actually became more successful after implementing proper technology systems. Their improved digital infrastructure attracted younger clients who had been hesitant to work with a firm that seemed technologically outdated. The business grew by 30% in the 6 months following the crisis. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in how we communicated about disagreements. The financial freeze had taught all of us that using power to control behavior is destructive, whether it's parents threatening to kick out children or children freezing parents' bank accounts. We developed healthier ways to address conflicts that focused on understanding and compromise rather than dominance and submission. I moved into my own apartment near campus, but the physical separation actually improved our emotional connection. Visits became voluntary rather than obligatory, and our conversations shifted from criticism and control to genuine interest in each other's lives. The story became legendary within our family and friend networks. People would ask my parents to tell the helicopter money story, their version of events where their computer science daughter had temporarily locked them out of their accounts to teach them about respect and dependence. Interestingly, my parents became advocates for other families dealing with generational technology gaps. They started encouraging their friends to learn basic digital skills rather than relying entirely on their children, and they warned other parents about the dangers of dismissing their children's technological expertise. The revenge had served its purpose, but the real victory was building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than control. My parents learned to value my contributions and treat my career choices with dignity. I learned that having power over someone carries responsibility for using it constructively rather than destructively. Looking back, the 3 days when I froze their financial access taught all of us about the difference between punishment and natural consequences. They had tried to punish me for making choices they didn't approve of, but I had simply allowed them to experience the natural consequences of their technological dependence. The most important lesson was about independence versus interdependence. True family relationships aren't about one person controlling another through financial or emotional manipulation. They're about people choosing to support each other while maintaining their individual autonomy and dignity. My parents now have a successful accounting firm with modern technology systems, a daughter they're genuinely proud of, and the knowledge that respect in family relationships must flow in both directions. I have parents who value my achievements, support my career choices, and treat me as an equal partner in our ongoing relationship. Have you ever had to teach family members a hard lesson about taking you for granted? Sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the ones who respect us least, until they learn what life is like without our contributions. How would you have handled parents who tried to control your career choices through financial threats? I'd love to hear your stories about family power dynamics and how you've dealt with relatives who underestimated your abilities. Drop your experiences in the comments below, hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories with satisfying endings. Share this with anyone who's ever been dismissed by family members for not meeting traditional expectations. Sometimes the most powerful response is showing them exactly how much they need what they've been criticizing. Thank you for joining me on this journey through family drama and financial revenge. Remember, true power in relationships comes from mutual respect, not from the ability to control or manipulate others. Until next time, keep building your independence and never let anyone make you feel small for being successful in your own way.